Welcome to Jesus Changes Everything, a daily podcast dedicated to providing a fresh look at the ancient and glorious truth that Jesus not only reigns, but is busy about the business of bringing all things under subjection, that celebrates the wonder and the glory that he has been given all authority in heaven and on earth. We come now in our ongoing journey through the book of Psalms to Psalm 9, which is another one of those Psalms which is sort of on the border between too long to read and short enough to read, which means I'm going to read it fast. So hold on to your hats. I will praise you, O Lord, with my whole heart. I will tell of all your marvelous works. I will be glad and rejoice in you. I will sing praise to your name, O Most High. When my enemies turn back, they shall fall and perish at your presence. For you have maintained my right and my cause. You sat on the throne, judging in righteousness. You have rebuked the nations. You have destroyed the wicked. You've blotted out their name forever and ever. O enemy, destructions are finished forever, and you have destroyed cities, even their memory has perished. But the Lord shall endure forever. He has prepared his throne for judgment. He shall judge the world in righteousness, and he shall administer judgment for the people in uprightness. The Lord also will be a refuge for the oppressed, a refuge in times of trouble. And those who know your name will put their trust in you, for you, Lord, have not forsaken those who seek you. Sing praises to the Lord who dwells in Zion. Declare his deeds among the people. When he avenges blood, he remembers them. He does not forget the cry of the humble. Have mercy on me, O Lord. Consider my trouble from those who hate me. You who lift me up from the gates of death, that I may tell of all your praise. In the gates of the daughter of Zion, I will rejoice in your salvation. The nations have sunk down in the pit which they made, in the net which they hid, their own foot is caught. The Lord is known by the judgment he executes. The wicked is snared in the work of his own hands. Selah. The wicked shall be turned into hell, and all the nations that forget God, for the needy shall not always be forgotten. The expectation of the poor shall not perish forever. Arise, O Lord, do not let men prevail. Let the nations be judged in your sight. Put them in fear, O Lord, that the nations may know themselves to be but men. Selah. Wow. It's interesting that so much of the Psalms is wrapped around some very common themes. One of those themes is the cry for God's deliverance. One of those themes is the cry for God's judgment against the psalmist's enemies. One of those themes is praise to God for his grace and kindness. And there's a sense in which there's like you take those themes and you can mix and match them in any number of ways. So it might be really not praise for God, but a lament against God because, hey, I'm in trouble and you haven't delivered me. Or it might be, hey, I'm in trouble and I know you're going to destroy my enemies. I have confidence in that. And that last theme can sort of be part of what we call imprecatory psalms, psalms of imprecation. In those instances, the psalmist is actually asking God to bring down God's judgment on the psalmist's enemies. This is where you read things like, O Lord, dash their heads against the rocks. O Lord, let his wife be a widow and let his children be fatherless. There's some really hard stuff and stuff that can make people uncomfortable. Eventually we're going to get to some of those, but I just wanted to mention that because here, this is one of those instances where David is not at the moment in trouble. He has been delivered already, and he is praising God. And one of the ways that he's praising God, or one of the things he's praising God for, is that God has brought judgment down on his enemies. There's a difference between seeking vengeance and celebrating God's work of judgment. There's a difference between celebrating God's work of God's judgment and having a vindictive, prideful attitude that invites God to bring judgment on you. Do not rejoice, we're told, when your enemy fails. But this certainly looks like what David's doing. Well, that's because there is a difference. There's different kinds of enemies, and there's different kinds of rejoicing. We should celebrate when the Nazis are defeated in World War II. There's nothing wrong with that. That's a good and fitting thing to do. We should celebrate and give thanks to God for his deliverance in circumstances that may mean hardship for other people. There's nothing wrong with that. What we have to remember at all times and in all places that we live in light of God's grace. That God's favor toward us is not something that we earn, but it's something that he's given to us by his grace. Psalm 9 is a celebration. It is a rejoicing over God's deliverance. David even seems to celebrate, and I understand this as well. It's sort of the irony of how God's judgment works. And this kind of language shows up repeatedly in the Psalms, where either the enemies have been caught in their own trap, or David asks that they would be snared by their own net, that kind of thing. There's a poetic reality to sometimes how God's judgment works out, and David celebrates it. Now, what I want you to not lose sight of is David's assurance of God's active work in the world here and now. Have you had miraculous deliverances? Have you seen God's enemies be destroyed? Well, one thing you need to do is praise God, to rejoice and to celebrate. And the more you do that, the more equipped you'll be able to see him in every other victory that we might tend to overlook. It's one of the blessings of reading through these Psalms and studying them and getting them in our hearts. They remind us that God is here, that he is with us, and that he is at work.